enough there, I think. Peter's in Oxford. Peter, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I'm greeting from sunny Cornwall. Well spoken. What you just said actually left me almost speechless, but fortunately not quite speechless. I can speak with some authority on this because I'm from Ireland. I spent quite a long time living in Dublin and working in Belfast, and I can tell you the question was always travelling up and down by train. Would this be one of the days when the train was not going to take 2 hours, but the journey would take 6 because of bomb threats on the line, or indeed bombs on the line?
Yeah.
And that's what the Troubles were like, and we don't want to go back there. And there are more crossing points on the Northern Ireland border than there are in the whole of the boundary between the EU and countries eastwards. So that gives you some idea.
Incredible.
You couldn't reconstruct the border there, as Anne earlier said. And I think she made a very good point, actually, which is that Northern Ireland, and your previous caller made a very good point, that Northern Ireland is doing quite well out of all this because, of course, being a member of the Customs Union and also of the UK is a unique position. They can export to both. They're doing economically better than any other part of the UK bar London. And I think the DUP forgets that at their peril because that's what they're proposing to burn up. I'm no admirer of Rishi Sunak, but I think we're in the unfortunate position of being reliant on him, and we have to hope that he continues in office. Because
I think you just heard me come to that realisation during the last bit of the programme. It's sort of halfway through. You go, he's the grown up. He's the grown up now.
Yeah.
Good God.
Well, he's made to look like that at any rate, and he has won some respect in the EU, at least as somebody who can be pragmatic. And we've been reminded in the last week or two that Boris Johnson and Liz Truss are waiting in the wings to come back in, so we may have to wish Rishi Sunak long life. So that is one side of it. The main point I was going to make, however, was that this is not an equal battle. If, in fact, things go pear-shaped, and obviously if the Northern Ireland Protocol falls, then the withdrawal agreement falls, then the Trade and Cooperation Agreement falls, and there are tariffs. It's as simple as that. The Europeans have said very clearly that they will act because they have to act against the UK in that event. And the big problem is, of course, that the UK can't reciprocate.
No.
Because as you yourself have said on your programme, I'm sure many times, the UK has forgone the opportunity to construct a border infrastructure or impose the means by which they can impose tariffs on incoming European goods. So what you're going to be facing
Jacob Rees-Mogg said it was beyond possibility because it would cost so much.
It would not be in the UK's interest.
That's just to check them, never mind impose tariffs.
You'd have even emptier shelves than you have now, James, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And that's what you're up against. And we're very reliant on European imports. We can't just block them. We can't impose tariffs because of the practicalities. So it's going to be a very unequal trade war. So what really the people like Sir Braverman are proposing is yet another act of severe self-harm, as indeed Brexit was in the first place. But people aren't hearing this. And I should say in parentheses, of course, that the whole retained EU law bill could possibly have the same effect. And it's important in relation to Northern Ireland because you can't implement the retained EU law bill in Northern Ireland without carrying out the Northern Ireland Protocol. So they then have an even more complex dilemma, upsetting the DUP by introducing disparities between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, sorry, even greater disparities, or alternatively burning up the whole thing. I can't see any way around that, except, of course, for common sense to prevail and to recognise that if Northern Ireland's better off within the customs union, then maybe Great Britain would be the same.
Well, that's a truth, isn't it? I mean, we all know that to be true. The alternative is to believe that some sort of a fetishised notion of sovereignty is preferable to measurable prosperity, and I'll allow people to pretend that they honestly believe that because you can't prove that they don't. But that is the bottom line, is that there is no mandate for any of this in Northern Ireland. Never mind the United Kingdom, and the reason for that is that for the people of Northern Ireland, unless you're fully signed up to a sort of history book analysis, this is better than anything else on the table.
Well, when we're being told that sovereignty versus economic survival is some kind of a choice we have to make, that's a false dichotomy, because actually, as you know yourself, Brexit has cost us massively, has cost the UK massively in terms of sovereignty. It no longer has the voice it did in the world. We should look back 10 years ago when the UK had more influence in the world than Ireland did. Imagine that. That's totally reversed. I mean, who does Biden listen to? He listens to Varadkar. He certainly doesn't listen to Sunak.
No, it's true.
And the same thing, right around the world, even in the Commonwealth. I mean, the Australians think it's a laugh when British people talk about reinventing the Commonwealth. They've moved on. So sovereignty or influence in the world, this is not something that has been gained through Brexit. And we are bound by EU laws, regardless of what we do, that are made completely without any British contribution.
How does it end? How does it end, Peter? Do you think?
Well, James, this is where you and I part company,
yes.
Because I'm part of the European movement. And in that context, I can recommend the European movement to anybody who's interested in the cause, because they're fighting very hard to ensure common sense prevails. And I can also recommend, in passing, something called the Davis-Darmstadt dossier, which documents extremely well. Just Google it.
Yes, I've
documents
seen
extremely well the harms of Brexit. I recommend it to all your listeners. But European movement at the moment, and it has come into the news to a certain degree, because we're just electing our new chair to succeed Andrew Adonis, who's done a fantastic job, and Michael Heseltine is our chair. And I think if you want good ideas about where to go, then listen to the European movement, what they have to say.
I think you've gone for the end of the book, whereas I was perhaps nudging you towards the end of the next chapter.
The next chapter, okay. Do the things that are doable within the next 2 years.
Yes.
That's things like Erasmus and Horizon. They're just two very good examples. And as you know yourself, they're things that we really have to achieve some common sense on. It's completely crazy that both education and science and indeed.
But you see what you're doing and what I do, and we're probably a bit closer on this than you appreciate, is that we're talking rationally. And what I mean really when I say how does it end, is how do the people speaking from a position of, I'm going to say madness now. I've been polite for years. I was going to say a lack of evidence or prioritising feelings over facts or an irrational perspective or an exceptionalist outlook. I'm just going to say mad. The people speaking from a position of madness still have the loudest and most powerful voices. Up until Rishi Sunak becoming Prime Minister, who, albeit that he's a Brexiter, doesn't actually fit that madness description. How does that end? How does the monopoly, the mad monopoly end? The people who have been steering this vehicle for 13 years into this scenario we now find ourselves in, how do their hands get prized off the steering wheel?
To give you an answer, I'd have to quote from the Telegraph. I know that pains us both, James, but Sherelle Jacobs recently, in her article, Brexit is Dead.
Another Brexiter on the most Brexity pages of any newspaper in the country.
Radical Brexiter who has almost given up hope. Of course, she says it's because Brexit was badly handled, and if it had been done well, it would be different.
Yeah, goes to a different school.
But nonetheless, when Brexiters are beginning to recognise that the game is up, and not all of them, of course, but many are, and they're recognising, although they blame the civil servants and so on, they're recognising that the aspirations that they had in 2016 are dead, and now they've got to play a new tune. Then I think that's a step in the right direction. I think we can see that. We shouldn't rejoice in the tragedy of Brexit, but clearly it's terrible for everybody.
Yes.
But at least people are starting to recognise that it is a tragedy, and that we must do something to try and roll back the tide on this one.
Beautifully put. Would you like me to make you smile before you return to your holidays? Are you on holiday in Cornwall, or have you moved there from Oxford?
Oh no, we love Cornwall. We're here 3 times a year.
Okay, I didn't know whether it was a permanent. I didn't know whether it was a permanent move or a temporary move. But shall I make you smile before you go?
Go ahead.
David Frost has taken to Twitter this morning to offer advice to negotiators.
Right.
I thought that would make you laugh.
So when you fail a driving test, then you should become a driving instructor.
Yes, I was trying to make you laugh, not the other way round. Exactly that. David Frost, who's failed his driving test on 37 occasions, is now opening a driving school. It is coming up to 11:30. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the question of how you get those hands off that steering wheel will probably be entertaining us for at least another year or two. And then what happens to the Tory party? If they lose the next election, what happens to them? Do the headbangers and the crazies continue to exert this kind of influence over the whole machine? And when you look at the membership, which is now just UKIP in slightly better clothes, then I think you're going to have to conclude it is. That's existential. Thomas Watts is here now with the headlines.
President Putin has made repeated attacks